Imagine you're developing a large-scale e-commerce website and you are using a CI/CD pipeline so that you can deliver quality code faster. Now imagine you need to test its multiple endpoints, say for example, product search, order placement, etc. I have a few questions for you. How can you create a test suite that runs automatically? Question number two, how can you integrate test in your CI/CD pipeline so that every new feature or bug fix does not break your code? And how can you debug the API calls from your command line or in from your CI/CD pipeline? Can HTTP Client CLI or command line interface address all of these and more? I don't have answers to all these questions, but our guest, Marco Behler, definitely does. Oh, wait, you know about the HTTP client, right? Don't worry. If you don't, I think Marco will cover that as well. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining in. I'm your host, Mala Gupta. And now let me add our speaker to the stream.
Hi, Mala. Hi, folks. I'm happy to be here and talk about the HTTP client and the CLI.
Welcome, Marco. It's a pleasure to have you present with us today. And Marco is a fellow developer advocate with JetBrains and a long-time Java developer. And if you don't already know, he has a YouTube channel, which is Marco Codes. And he creates a lot of projects and he shares them all with a lot of advice, tips, and tricks. So if you haven't checked that out, you can do that now. Isn't that
so,
right,
please.
Marco?
Yes. That is correct. Please. Marco Codes YouTube channel, also a blog where I post regularly. Many different ways you can find my content online.
And before we move forward, we have another guest with us today, Vitali, developer advocate for Rust and for Fleet, also a fellow developer advocate with JetBrains. Now, let me add Vitali to the stream. Hey, Vitali, pleasure to have
Hi,
you with us today.
hi, folks. Thanks for having me here.
So we have a kind of experiment today. So Marco will present his session on HTTP Client CLI, and Vitali will be here to ask all sort of questions to Marco. Is that right, Vitali?
That's true. I'll try. And I know nothing about the topic, so it's a clear experiment.
Amazing.
Yes, and that was actually, if I might add, that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to make this session a bit more conversational, not just me talking for 1 hour. And I wanted to replicate the feeling, like, imagine you had a coworker in your office and you told them, hey, I have this new cool tool, HTTP client. Let me show you how it works. And this is what I want to do with Vitali together. Just have a friendly session and show you what it's all about.
That is great. So let's any questions. How many questions is Vitali would ask? I'll keep a track of that, so don't worry. And before I let both of you take the stage, let me share some quick housekeeping details. Everyone who's watching this session right now, please use the YouTube chat to post your questions. We are monitoring the questions as you post them, and we'll try to answer as many questions while Marco and Vitali are presenting their session. And the session is being recorded and will be hosted on IntelliJ IDEs YouTube channel and also on JetBrains Twitch channel. So if you haven't already subscribed to our channel, now is the time to do that. And if you like today's session, which I'm sure you will, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so that you don't not miss similar content. Now let me add Marco's slides to the screen, and both of you have fun.
Thank you, Mala. Talk to you in a bit. Right. Hi, folks. Welcome again from my side. As Mala already mentioned, we're going to be talking about the new HTTP Client CLI. And I'm not such a big fan of slides. So I prepared 2 or 3 slides for this presentation. The first one being, what are you going to learn? What are you going to take away from this session? I want you to take away 3 things, roughly. And the first one is, in case you don't know yet what HTTP client is, how it works, whatever, we're going to start the first part of our session with a quick recap of how it works inside the IDE. Vitali, just a quick question. Have you worked with HTTP client before?
No, unfortunately, no. I have no experience with that.
That is perfect. So, right, yeah, good. Then this is going to be a helpful section. The next section, once we know how we can work with the HTTP client inside the IDE, we're going to work with it in the CLI, because there's now, a CLI version of it. And we're going to see, its advantages, maybe also its limitations, and all this sort of stuff. That's the second part of the presentation of this session. And the third part is, as we already have, a working CLI tool, we could also use HTTP client as part of a CI/CD workflow. In my case, we're going to be using TeamCity, our own CI/CD server, but obviously it will work with any CI/CD solution you already have working in your company. And I think that's it for the slides that I have. And now it's, just, pure live coding. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly switch back into my IDE, and I prepared something for you. So I have a Java web application, and actually it doesn't really matter what programming language you or whatever ecosystem. It's just a tiny web app. More specifically, it's called a new to-do list. It's one of the millions of to-do applications, to-do list applications. And just to show you what it can do, here on the right side, you see this endpoints window. And it literally has two JSON endpoints. One of them is, get me all the to-do list items you have in the database. One is, let me please create a new to-do list item. And there's a third one, please give me all the users you have in your system. And the other endpoints you can all ignore. But it's a very simple web application that I already booted up, which runs on localhost 8080. And I literally have these three endpoints I can use. Now, I can call rather. The question is, how would I call these endpoints? And there's many different ways. You could even curl on the command line. You could use one of the many HTTP clients, Postman, whatever have you. Or you could be using IntelliJ IDEs HTTP client. Right, that's what we're going to do now. What you want to do for this is, inside IntelliJ, inside your project, you can simply create a new file. And I'm just going to call it requests, and I'm going to give it a specific extension, .http, because .http will trigger the HTTP client support. And you can see that I have now in this file, I have some sort of a header bar here, which looks a bit different than if it were just, a text file. And inside here, I can start writing my HTTP requests. Now, let's start. What's interesting is I told you, I think my application is running under localhost 8080. And even though I already told you a second ago, we had a look at these endpoints that we had, the three endpoints. Let's imagine I'm forgetful and I don't even know anymore which endpoints I have, right? But I know I want to execute a GET request. So I would just start writing GET, for example. And then HTTP and localhost 8080, right? That's nice locally. Now, what is the endpoint again? And I could look inside, my project again, or I could just do an auto-completion. The nice thing about the auto-completion is that IntelliJ knows my project. It knows it's a Java Spring Boot project. It knows the endpoints. So actually, what you'll get here is you'll automatically get the endpoints that you could get in this case, not the post endpoint, just the get endpoint. For example, the to-dos, UL. And that's it. That's what I want to call. And then this is actually it. I just want to quickly see if a call to this UL would actually work. So I'm just going to run it. I did it with a keyboard shortcut. And you can, by the way, see all the keyboard shortcuts I'm using at the bottom of the screen. Or you could have also clicked the gutter icon over here. Running this request, and as you can see here in the tool window down here, we executed get localhost 8080 /todos, and we got a nice little JSON array back with one object inside, with one item which seems to be never done, and what done is set to false. Vitaly, does that already rock your boat?
Yeah, but I wonder, is it possible to mention some HTTP headers there?
Yes, it is. It is very much so. And we'll have a look at that in a tiny second. I'll talk about headers in a second. So for now, I'm just, calling get inside this one file. Imagine I want to have multiple separate requests. I need a separator to separate the requests from one another, and this is the 3 hashes. So it's not just me randomly, putting in 3 hashes. That is actually the separator between the different requests. You can also have more, but you'll need to have 3 at least. Now let me just think that I'll just going to copy that down here, and I'll have a request to users, for example. Let me just quickly run that and see. Hey, I get one user back named Marco, right? Now, what happens is, let's say in bigger projects, I might have some useful, requests that I want to run again and again and again. And it would be kind of cool if I could just, kind of reference them wherever I am, if I'm inside a Java file, inside a SQL file, whatever, and just quickly run that request. And you can actually do that because you can give these requests names, meaning I could say the name is get all users, like so. You can see it's highlighted a bit differently. And when I run in IntelliJ the run anything action, which on the Windows is control, I can just write, get all, and I can see, hey, here's my get all users requests. I can hit enter, and it just, executes the request for me. And that is pretty handy in bigger projects where you don't always want to go back to, your HTTP files or whatever have you. You know what a request is called. You just execute it on the fly. All right, that brings us to the topic of what Vitaly just mentioned, headers, obviously. I'm going to do the separator again. And by the way, one thing I forgot. I'm going to show you in this file, let's say the most popular ways you might, use the HTTP client. It's not a complete reference. There's a ton of documentation, a ton of examples. Later on, I'm going to show you. You don't even need to remember everything I'm going to show you. Just, keep in mind, have it in the back of your mind, some of the concepts that I'm showing you. But I don't want you to have to remember every single word that I put here in this file. All right, so what we want to do is, let's say we want to create a new to-do list item. So we could do a post. Again, we're going to do it against localhost 8080 and against my to-dos endpoint. Now, Vitaly mentioned headers. We want to send in a JSON object for this, which means I need to specify, let's say, the content type header, application JSON. As you can see, is that you write headers simply here on, after, the original post line. You could write any header you have, like, for example, X device accept, yada, yada, whatever have you. Have multiple headers here, set cookies, whatever have you. So key value. You can do all of this by just,
Marco, please, agent. Can you put agent there? Like Firefox version 145.
Okay, user agent.
User agent.
Firefox 145, like so.
Yeah, for them to be jealous, if anyone reads those logs.
Okay, good. So we're going to have that. Maybe I'm going to delete the other two, but I'm just going to go with content type user agent. Right, so we have that. And now the next question is how I need to send in a JSON object. And my to-do list items, when I just, rerun this, let me just quickly have a look again. You can see they have a name and a done field. And I need to kind of specify that. How would I do that? Well, simple. You need an empty line after your headers, right? Otherwise, it would just, be another header. And then you can simply start writing your JSON object. So, for example, I'm going to say, hey, I don't know, I need to go shopping. I need to go online shopping with Firefox, something like that. And done is false. Did you notice something? The interesting thing is, if I, for example, miss something here, like a quote, I already get error highlighting. And that is because IntelliJ understands, hey, this is a JSON object, and it needs to be valid. And I immediately see, hey, this is invalid JSON. I need to add my quote here. How does IntelliJ know? It knows because of the content type here. So if I said content type is application XML, for example, everything will be red underlined because obviously it's not valid XML. And by the way, in the same token, I could just, write my XML, get auto completion, everything that I would expect, code inspections, whatever have you. And And that is, I think, a pretty damn cool feature. Right. Does that answer your question with the headers and maybe even the bodies?
Absolutely, thank you.
Actually, I haven't tried running it. Let's see what happens. So I just ran the request again with a keyboard shortcut. Just imagine I'm clicking the gutter icon here. So I'm posting. With my user agent here, Firefox 145. And in the console, I can see, yes, that actually worked. The response I got back is my to-do list item I posted, and HTTP 200. So everything is good. Cool. So we have that. Then people who already know HTTP client, I also want to talk a bit about new stuff we added. And for example, what you can do is we added a couple of variables you can use. For example, inside here, if you, for whatever reason, wanted to have a random string, you could have these curly braces. And then, you can type $random. And then you have alphanumeric, alphabetic, email, float, hexadecimal, whatever have you. And let me just try alphabetic, maybe. I don't know, 50. Let's see what happens, right? I'm running this, and you can see, yay. So I actually posted, a random 50 long string to my backend. So you have these, random variables you can use. Pretty useful. There's also, I think you have random dot. There's also stuff, for example, to get timestamp. Let me just see what auto completes to, right? We have the random, we have timestamps, we have UUIDs, ISO timestamp. So there's just a couple of things you can use here. I'll just put random email here for now. All right. So,
Marko,
yes.
Let me just a couple of questions. So first question, I'm not sure if it's possible, but if we have like encoding, like, I don't know, base 64, for example, so should I write base 64 encoding by myself here, or it can be done somehow?
That's actually a damn good question, which I don't know the answer to, but we'll try to find out. In the upper right corner, you have this examples link, which I, by the way, would recommend to any of you to just have a look what the client is able to do. For example, get request, post requests, request for authorization. We'll dig into that in a bit. Now, let me just click post requests, and let's see if there is an example with base 64 encoding inside. There doesn't seem with bodies parameters. I don't know the good answer to this actually now.
But I see at least I see something about URL encoding. So there is an example there. That's something already interesting.
Yes. So actually, I think Yuri, who is hopefully answering also some questions in the YouTube chat. Maybe Yuri, you can add a comment here on base 64 specifically. But other than that, I explore you to have a look at these examples, right? Okay. What was there another question, by the way?
Yeah, and another question was, maybe I'm just so. If I get some data from one request and I want to feed it to another one.
Aha. Yes, we'll get into that in a second. Yes.
That's great.
Okay. Cool. So we have the examples, get, post, authorizations, and whatever. And before we get to how we can pass data between requests, let's have a look at one more thing. Back in my file, let's say I want to call my endpoint again, my to-dos endpoint again. But interestingly enough is at one point, sooner or later in your application, you might have multiple environments. So not just local host 8080, but there might be a dev environment, a staging environment, a prod environment, whatever have you. For that, what you're going to do is you can have, HTTP client can have environments. So again, we're going to put a variable here, which I would call host or whatever, it's a random name. And at the moment, it is yellow, meaning IntelliJ doesn't know what it means. When I hit Alt-Enter, it tells me, hey, do you want to create an environment with this variable host, which I want to do. And there's two different types of environments. There's regular environments with, for example, with these host strings. And there's also private environments where you would put like passwords, tokens, and other settings there. And in fact, both of these environments are just files, right? And you would just make sure to never, commit and push the private files to your VCS, only the regular ones. So I'm just going to go with regular. And now you'll see the file that got created. It's http-client.env.json. And the other one would have a .private also inside the file name. And it's just a JSON file where you can see this is how I would specify my host. So HTTP localhost 8080, like so. And if I had another environment, for example, the staging environment, I could go HTTP staging, something like this. I can just put whatever key values, whatever I have inside this file here. Right, back here in my HTTP file, I can see that now IntelliJ already said, hey, I'm running this with the dev environment. I could also, choose the staging environment. But now I'm just going to go with dev for now. I'm going to run it here, and you can see, hey, the request worked. It went, it called localhost 8080/todos. Let me try staging. So I'm going to do this. Yes, and the DNS name doesn't resolve. So I'll get an error message, but that was expected, just to show you that I can have different environments inside my HTTP file. Right.
So if I get to correctly, so you can write one file, one HTTP file with all the requests parameterized with this host environment, and then you just choose once which environment you want to work with.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it is.
Okay, great.
Exactly. Right. Now, we have, these are the most basic scenarios essentially with the HTTP client. And now there's two things that one of them you already mentioned is that people sometimes want to do something with data they got after a request. They want to store it, they want to do something with it, and then maybe pass it on to a new request. And maybe they also want to do something before a request. And we're going to have a look at both scenarios, what we can offer you here. So let's say for a moment that I want to, get my localhost 8080 to-dos again. Now, HTTP client allows you to write JavaScript, actually. And that JavaScript can post-process the response you're getting from the server. The way you do this is you have an empty line again, and then you can write it exactly like so. So the greater than sign and the curly braces and the percentage. And inside here, you can now start writing JavaScript. So var hello equals hello, something like this. If I'm not mistaken, we're using the Rhino engine, and I think the ECMAScript is 2015-ish, something like this, which means not the newest, sexiest JavaScript features are available, but I think we're going to be switching soon to GraalJS. Again, Yuri, please let us know in the comments if that is still the case, but just so you know that not all language features will be available to you. But in any case, we have JavaScript here. And apart from JavaScript, you have a couple of objects you can call. And let's say the most important object might be the client object, which has a couple of methods. The client lets you write tests, for example, on the data that comes back. So we have a test method, we have an assert method, and we're going to look at that in a second. We have a global field where you can set variables, and these variables other requests can later on reference in the next request. So that is one way of doing that, and we'll look at that as well. And apart from the client, we also have access to the response. So we can go response.headers, response.body, response.status, content type. And we're just going to work with these two for now to give you a rough idea of what they can do. Again, there's many examples in the example section. but I'll show you one. Imagine I get the to-dos back and I want to write a tiny test suite. So I'm going to say, hey, I want to have one test. So I'm going to write client.test. The test is called the get all to-dos returns 200. And I need to pass in a function here. And the actual test is maybe multiple assertions. So I'm just going to go client.assert. And what I want to do is response status equals 200, right? And if it's not 200, the error message should be expected 200, but was maybe plus response status. There's still some work that we are doing at the moment to make the assertion library more powerful. It's a work in progress, and in the next couple of versions, you will have more specific assertions available here. But for now, this is what you can do. I don't know about you, Vitaly, but I'll just run this once now, and let's see what happens. Okay, so we ran the request, and this here looks in the console just like before. So I'm getting all the to-dos, and you can see I'm getting all the 3 to-dos. I like the Firefox one, the 3 to-dos, and we have a new tab here now, which is the tests tab inside IntelliJ. And you can see there was one test which was run, which is get all to-dos returns a 200. And as we got a 200 back from the server, the test was fine, and the test is green, right?
So Marko,
Yeah.
could you tell me what is the life cycle? Like you make a request, get a response, and then you execute all those tests.
Exactly, right? Exactly. This is it. Okay. Exactly. And then the JavaScript that you write here gets executed. You could, for example, say, let's say I want to write another test, for example, and they get, the stuff gets done sequentially. Let's say that my to-do list contains a specific item. These are great names for tests. So let me just have a quick look again. I'm just gonna I'm gonna have a look at. I get 3 items. Okay, so the first one is this never done item. So what I can do is I could say response body, and if it's a JSON object, by the way, it gets automatically converted. So if it's JSON text which is being sent back, it gets automatically converted to a JSON object. So I can say here, hey, from the response body, give me the first item of the array, which is this item here. Then I'm just gonna say the name property here, and then I'm just gonna go the index of never. Should be there, so it should not be equal to -1, and the error message is never done should be there. Should be there. The naming is a bit messed up, right? But now I have essentially 2 tests, and when I rerun my my request here, and go to the tests, I can see both of these tests were run, and they run after each other.
I don't get one thing.
Yes.
How does it know what is going to be returned? Like when you put dot after body, it says name, so there is a code completion there.
But there is actually that code completion with the name. I think that is a good question. If the name auto completion is there because I put it there before manually, or if it really knows .name. I'm not sure about that, but. Yeah,
I think in general it's impossible to.
Yeah, it is.
Get what.
Yes, yeah. So I think it's just because I put it here in an exercise run. But again, yes.
Yeah, but it looks like magic.
It does look like magic. All right. So we have that. So we have these 2 tests now that we did in handling the response. Now, what Vitaly said a bit earlier ago was, can't we just pass data along? And yes, you can definitely also pass data along. And I mentioned that before, because you can go client.global and then .set. And for example, now it's a bit contrived, but say you have a specific cookie, right? And that comes back from the call that you make. Then you could just say, headers give me the first value of set cookie, right? And whatever the very first cookie is, I'm getting back here. I just put it into a variable which is called my cookie. Now I can use it in other requests. For example, I could go up here and say, well, I just want to, for whatever reason, I want to have a parameter here, which is called my param. And then I can simply put the my cookie name inside here, right? And this will actually work. So I can reference it just by referencing, the variable name. I don't have to go client.global.set. I could do in the JavaScript, I could do a .get, but I can actually use it here in the URL. I can use it, later on in the headers down here, wherever you want to, reference the variable. And this is one way of, passing global variable state around. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. So, and by the way, just to show you, let's say I want to show you this in action. So now I'm just, going to put my cookie to this value. I'm going to execute the request, right? So this hopefully worked, the response handler, right? The test ran. And now when running here, my to-do request up here, let me just run it against dev again, right? When I look at the request, then I can actually see here that the get call, actually has my parameter set to my 1283 whatever variable that I saved before. Right. So now you can see it in action, not just believe me that it works. All right. So this is one use case, and this use case is actually very important for the CI/CD workflow I'm going to be showing you in a second. But one last thing is that usually you might not just want to do something after you call something, do something with the response, but it might be that you have to do some authorization stuff before you call an endpoint. And I'm just going to quickly copy and paste an example I prepared in here. So it's another, localhost 8080. I'm just getting the to-dos endpoint, and I want to put in a timestamp and a signature, which I want to calculate before I call before I do the call. And this you can do again with some JavaScript. Again, you can simply say now, hey, I want to write JavaScript before my call, not just after my call. And I'm going to paste in the JavaScript. So I don't have to write it out, right? And I'm going to run you through what the JavaScript does. If you don't want to, set global variables on the HTTP client, but just for a specific request, then you can say request.variables.set. And I'm setting the timestamp variable here that I'm referencing later, and I'm setting the signature variable here that I'm also referencing in the URL. And the timestamp is just essentially the time divided by 1,000, the current one. And the signature uses another helper object I have available. It's the crypto object, right? And if I want to play with MD5, SHA1, 256, 512, I can do that. And this is the way I'm using this object here to just create a signature with a very secret key here, my secret API key. And it's essentially, just creating that signature on the fly before I'm executing the request. Now, let me show you what that looks like. I'm just going to run the request. It opens up. And when I have a look at the request now, I can see that here is my timestamp, right, in a funky format. And here is my signature. And with these two mechanisms that you can, run JavaScript before you call something, an endpoint, or that you can run JavaScript and save stuff after calling an endpoint, most authorization scenarios should hopefully be covered. And everything else essentially that you want to do should also hopefully be covered. Right. Vitaly, what do you think up until now?
Well, it's amazing.
Yeah, actually, I'm pretty hyped about the HTTP client. I have been using it a lot, not just for this session.
Yeah, I'm just thinking how I can use it tomorrow.
Yeah. Yes, you need more JSON endpoints in your life. No. All right. So one last thing before this recap of how this works is over. If for whatever reason you need, for example, to curl, to use curl in a specific, I don't know, context, you can simply go inside your HTTP request, hit Alt-Enter, and then there's a tiny action which is called convert to curl and copy to clipboard. I just click that, and actually let me just post it into a plain text file. And here you can see, here is the ready to be executed curl command, which does the post against localhost 8080 with the content type, with the user agent, and even with a random email address, and done. So should you ever need that quickly for some specific tool, whatever, then you could actually convert it to curl, but maybe you don't even need that anymore because we now have the client CLI. And that is essentially the second part of this presentation, of this session, which means we're gonna switch to the command line for now.
That's great. I remember writing these slashes myself, and it was awful, I should say.
It truly is. Yes, with the slashes, it's I don't even know who does that. Yeah. And by the way, just before I switch to the command line, maybe as a quick summary at the end, I showed you the examples, right? Which you can always have a look at here in the upper right corner for get, post, and authorizations and tests, everything I've shown you so far. There's also other sections for GraphQL requests and WebSocket requests. And that is because the HTTP client doesn't only understand HTTP requests. In fact, you can also do GraphQL requests with it. You can do WebSocket requests with it. And you can also do gRPC requests with it, where there's no example section here yet. Unfortunately, I can't show you all of this in this session, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind that inside the IDE, you can have multiple different types of requests. On the CLI tool, only the HTTP requests work until now. We're working on the other ones, the support. So we're focused on HTTP requests for now. All right, so that's that. Goodbye, IntelliJ IDEA. We learned a lot. Now, I already said we now have the CLI tool available. The CLI tool is free. You don't need a license key or whatever. Whereas in the IDE, you actually need, for example, IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate, right? Or the professional versions of our IDE to use the client. With the CLI, however, you can just download it, install it, and you're good to go. Now the question is, how do you download it? There's two ways. I'm going to show you both ways. The first one is, and I almost feel this is kind of a stabbing curl in the back, because the first way is curling the HTTP client locally as one last curl, and then kind of saying goodbye to curl, right? So what you can do is, I'm just going to show it to you. You just pass the curl command into your command line window, and what then happens is you download it. It's a zip file. You unzip it, and I have it inside a folder, dev IntelliJ HTTP, I think. Yes, like so. And so I have a folder on my system, IntelliJ HTTP, where you have a bat file on Windows, or a proper script file for not proper script file for the Mac OS and Linux versions. And I just put this directory on my path, so I can call the HTTP client, the CLI client, everywhere I am. So what I can do is I just call IntelliJ HTTP, and here is my client output. There's many parameters, flags, whatever the client, the CLI understands. I'm going to walk you through a couple of them. But first of all, I want to have a quick win. And the quick win would be here, IntelliJ HTTP. I'm just going to quickly go back to my project. I want to have a reference to my HTTP file. So I'm just going to copy the path here. I'm going to take the absolute path, right? Paste it in here, because I just want to run this file, execute all the requests from this file, right? So hopefully you can see this. Let me see. On Windows, unfortunately, the coloring isn't quite there yet. On Linux, macOS, you have nice coloring here. So what you get is, you get some output. A header file, a header, where you saw, hey, what request did we just execute? Which file did we just execute? Public environment, private environment, we'll see that in a second. And then you get output, request 1 was successful, request 2 was successful, request 3, 4. So everything, is being executed one after another. There is a problem, however. It says invalid URI because of unsubstituted variable hosts. Remember, we have this one variable inside the HTTP file, the host variable, and the client doesn't yet know what host points to. Simple, we can change that. And before we do that, let me just see, 6 requests have completed successfully and 1 have failed tests. Okay, so how do we do that? We call the same command again, and we say, hey, I just want to set a specific environment, the dev environment, and I'm called it like that. Oh no, I'm seeing an output that an environment was passed, but I didn't specify a specific environment file. That is correct. I need to also put in the file we created with the -v flag. And by the way, you don't have to remember all these flags specifically, what they do, how they work. You can always read up on them. I just want you to remember you can execute full HTTP files. And then there are some flags where you can set environments, where you can set the environment files and whatever have you. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Now, I'm going to go back here and the environment file. Right. I'm just going to copy, again, the absolute path to my environment file. I'm going to paste it in here, run it. Right. Did that work? No, it didn't. Let me see where I made a hiccup. Charlie, can you see the hiccup? It is not -v. It is, I think, -v. Yes. See, that was the hiccup I had. And now it looks a bit different. The request ran. You can see now here, up here, I see that my HTTP file was referenced, that also my public environment is here, where actually I see, my host equals all the variables that were being used for this run, for this very specific run. I can see that.
Sorry, I don't get, why is it public? So did you specify it somehow so that it's public environment?
So in fact, it's just two different. So the lowercase v parameter is for the public environment files. There's another parameter. Sorry, there's another flag for the private environment files, so that we don't up here see all the secrets and passwords somewhere printed out on the console, so that these two are being blacked out. Is blacked out the right word? Yes. In the end, it's just two files. It's again a JSON file, public environment file, private environment file, but it's two different flags so that these secrets don't accidentally leak somewhere in the usage.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yes. All right. Yeah, we have that. So we have now, we saw the 6 requests that worked. If you, for whatever reason, say, hey, this is not enough output for me, what you could always do, you could set the logging level to verbose. And now what you can see here on the command line is you'll actually see the requests and the responses for all the requests. So for example, request number 3 here, we did a post to localhost 8080 to-dos. You can see the request here, including the JSON. You have the separator here. You see the response, right, including everything, the JSON response body, the response code, and then you have the next. Then you have the next request here. So should you need that, different logging levels are available, and you can get more information.
So I see my cookie, this string in the request, and that's because we set it after this request, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly. Let me just see. Where was my? Which one exactly do you mean again?
I think it was a little bit high, maybe.
It was a little bit high.
I just saw my cookie in one of the requests. It was request.
Yes, then it was, yeah, exactly, my cookie.
This one.
Exactly, and that is because we execute this exactly before we execute the JavaScript code in the later request. Exactly.
So it was correct in UI because we run the request number 5 and then request number 4 again.
Yes, exactly. Yes, okay. That is very well spotted. Yep, exactly. Okay. Then what else do we have? Well, something that happens that you want to do in when you don't want to mess with certificates and whatever have you. And by the way, there's a whole section in the documentation about how the HTTP client works together with proper SSL certificates, and if you have custom certificates, how you can make the client aware, all of that stuff. Or you go the short route and you say insecure, right? And then you just, connect to your HTTPS endpoint with no checking of the certificates. That is, a quick and dirty fix. That is one thing I wanted to show you. And the last flag, and maybe even the most exciting flag now for what we're about to see in a second, is the so-called reports flag. And it is --report. Now, I'm just going to run everything again. And nothing changed. I can still see, hey, 6 requests completed and there are no failed tests. But now I have a reports folder. And when I look at that reports folder, inside I have a report XML. And I'll just show you what that XML looks like. And actually, that is the, so to speak, JUnit XML file format, where I can, see I have a test suite and test suite. I always say that wrong, I think. I have multiple test cases. And here on the command line, this might look a bit, well, underwhelming. But the interesting thing is actually that this XML file with these outputs is actually the bridge to any of your CI/CD systems, because your CI/CD system then can actually take this file and display it as proper, ran tests, failed tests, successful tests, and also maybe cancel your CI workflow because a test failed, or you let the whole thingy run. So that is why the third part of the session is how we can now use this HTTP client, generate the reports file inside of a CI/CD workflow, and see what that whole scenario looks like. Vitali, before I continue, any more questions on the CLI bit?
No, I think I'm good. I just want to know the rest.
Okay, you just want to know the rest. Okay, so what I have is I have a TeamCity server prepared, a TeamCity project, so to speak. It's called a new to-do list. And if you're not used to TeamCity, what you can see is that there is, I have 3 jobs, so to speak, or build configurations in TeamCity speak. Build, deploy, test. It's a tiny build pipeline, right? So they run after each other. And test is essentially where I want to, by the way, I almost forgot. I need to commit and push this. So this is my webinar, because in a second, if we try to run this, then TeamCity will say, hey, nothing, that there is no such file. So I'm just gonna, quickly do what every good developer does, ignore all the commit and push warnings and commit and push anyway. Don't do that, take the time to fix it. But for now, I'll just quickly try and push it. Let's see if that worked. Yes, that worked. So now the files are actually in my repository. The request HTTP file. Now, back inside TeamCity, I want to configure my test job to run the HTTP client against that file, just like on the command line. And I want TeamCity to pick up this report XML file, which it will do. And I want to display the test results. That's what I want to do. And you can see there's already a new build starting because I just pushed the changes. Okay, so now I don't want to bother you with the TeamCity specific ways of how to configure jobs and whatever. Inside here, we need to put in the IntelliJ HTTP client command that you saw me execute on the command line. But there's a tiny twist. I don't have the client, the CLI, installed on my TeamCity agent, the machine who builds, who runs this build. Instead, I wanted to take the opportunity to show you the second way of running HTTP client, and that is through a Docker image, right? Remember, I showed you the curl way for me locally, where I unzipped it, unpacked it. And there's also the Docker way where, you can simply use the HTTP client as a Docker image and run it almost as if you were running the command line equivalent, the CLI equivalent. And that's what we're going to do because I have Docker installed on my build agent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste in let's maybe say, somewhat of a scary looking command. You don't have to despair because I will run you through what this means. If you somewhat, know Docker, you run an image by saying, run a container by saying Docker run. There's a couple of parameters, Docker specific ones, I will talk about in a second. We'll just ignore them for now. What is important is which Docker image do we want to run? It's JetBrains IntelliJ HTTP client available in the public Docker repository, right? Afterwards, you can see that we're setting the environment. You saw me do this on the command line. You also saw me specify the environment file. You also saw me specify a second earlier the -- report flag. You also saw me, hey, let's please run the request HTTP file. So this is exactly what we did on the command line. Now, there's just one thing left, essentially. What we want to do a mapping, meaning the current directory, and the current directory here, the PWD directory, is the one I have checked out. So it's my repository, my new to-do list repository. This is being mapped to /work inside a Docker container. And that is because the HTTP client, the Docker image HTTP client, the Dockerized HTTP client rather, expects your code to be inside the /work and everything else which comes here then, request HTTP, is always relative to that work directory, right? Hopefully that made sense. That was maybe a rather complicated way of explaining it, but I tried my best. All right, so I have this command, and this bit here at the beginning, I'll talk about in a second. Let's just try and run this and actually see what happens, because maybe it doesn't work. And I want to find out if it indeed works. So we'll have to wait a second. You can already see I just triggered the build. The test build is running at the moment, and we'll just wait a tiny second until the test build finished, and then we'll see how that goes. Vitaly, do you use Docker a lot? I mean, do you have lots of Docker experience?
Well, not a lot, but I have some, unfortunately.
Okay. But what does unfortunately mean?
Well, it's you have to remember all those like -- commands for Docker, and it's a lot of configuration. But yeah, it works. It helps in a lot of situations.
Yes. All right. So
and I also like to use it inside IntelliJ IDEA, I should say.
Aha. Yes. Yeah. Yes. All right, so what you can see is, so the build kind of ran, but it says, and it also detected, by the way, which is pretty cool, in a tab that we have tests. And that is because the reports.xml file got read in by TeamCity, and TeamCity then shows you, the test results for these client.tests that we wrote in the HTTP file, which I find pretty cool. And then when you open up the tests, why they failed, then you can see that, oh no, connect to localhost 8080 doesn't work. And that is because we're inside a Docker container and we're saying, hey, localhost 8080, but localhost 8080 refers to my Docker container. But the problem is my application runs on the host, on the build agent itself. So it doesn't run inside the same Docker container, so to speak, which is a problem. It's actually not so much of a problem because we actually thought about that use case and gave you a simple flag. And that simple flag, I'll show you. There's one more flag for you to learn and to remember. It is the -D, uppercase D flag, right? I'm just going to quickly save and run my job. And I'll tell you what now happens when I use the -D flag. -D means that the HTTP client will replace on the fly requests to localhost 8080 with requests to host.docker.internal, which is a special DNS name which references the host, right? So in my case, that will be my build agent where the build is running on and where actually my application is deployed. And on Linux, to make this host Docker internal special name work, you actually need to have this ugly flag inside here. The funny thing is, if you're used to Docker desktop, so if you use Docker desktop on Windows or Mac OS, whatever, then host Docker internal works out of the box. But on the Linux CI system, you might also have to add this ugly flag here, which means the command line to execute this request with Docker is maybe a bit convoluted, but at the end of the day, it works. Right. Now, let me just see if what I told you is true. Right. I just went to my overview page again. Let me just open up a new to-do list. I have my build job here, my test job. I can see tests have passed. Let me just open up this build because the test is green. And yes, here you go. I mean, you can see it says flaky because the test failed before, but I can actually see that, my test results are fine. So the tests ran through. I can see my get all users response, the response handlers here that, contains specific item. That is pretty damn cool. And, depending on if, for example, these tests failed, I could obviously, kill my CI/CD pipeline later on. Or I could make it work. It's just a simple way of, if you, as part of your CI/CD workflow, you want to quickly make sure that an endpoint is available, for example, or you need to download a file and put it somewhere, whatever, and just make sure this is available too. Then you can simply use these HTTP requests you're already using anyway during your development, whatever, put them as a specific step inside your CI/CD workflow, and then you're good to go. You can simply reuse what you already have. Right. That was a lot.
Yeah, I like it very much. It's like you can do that inside your IDE. You can check that in terminal, and then you just do the same thing in CI/CD pipeline. That's great.
Exactly. That is the whole point. Exactly. You just reuse whatever you have, so you don't have to change the file. The only thing you need to do is either install IntelliJ, the client, you curl it and put it somewhere on your machine, or use a Docker image, and then everything else works exactly the same way as if you would run it locally or inside your IDE. All right. That was kind of the third part of the session. And let me see if I have more slides because there's one more slide left. Right. Further reading. Everything you saw me do at the moment. I posted some URLs in here, which I know you won't really click on. That's why I also put the Google search phrase here. If you want to learn more about the HTTP client itself, either click the examples inside the IDE or just search for HTTP client IntelliJ IDEA documentation, and you'll find all the examples, everything you ever wanted to know about the client itself. You'll find it under the link, the first link you'll find there. Same thing for the CLI. The only thing you do is you add CLI in here, and then you'll find a nice documentation link which shows you everything about the CLI. All the options you have, the limitations I talked about, that there's no GraphQL support there yet. For example, everything you find here under these two links, just do a quick Google search and you'll be happy. Right. Last but not least, that means questions. Do we have any questions other than, the questions from Vitali so far?
So, first of all, Marco, thank you so much for an amazing presentation. I kind of lost track of how many questions did we get on the session. So we had a lot of questions,
Okay.
but we were fortunate because Yuri was answering a lot of questions. So since we are running out of time, we're already up to the hour. I'll quickly ask you a couple of questions and then we'll try to answer the remaining questions probably as a blog post, or we'll kind of see how
Yes.
we can answer those questions.
Yes.
Okay, so the first question is, I'll show you the good ones, the remarks like, hey, that was an amazing session later after I asked the questions. So the first question is, when is OAuth 2 gonna be possible? Can we see the variables that we can set dynamically somewhere?
OAuth 2, right. So you can manually reconstruct the OAuth 2 flow, but there's no specific built-in OAuth 2 support at the moment that will just, recreate all these different OAuth 2 flows for you.
Right. And I think Yuri also mentioned that this is one of the top priorities that he has in the roadmap at the moment. So the work is in progress. So there's another question. Can I export .http file to automate a functional test outside IntelliJ IDEA?
I'm not entirely sure if I understood that question. Can I export the file itself? So,
that's okay.
I mean, so you have the file, you can do whatever you want with the file, so to speak. So it doesn't have to live. So as we showed, we put the file on a CI/CD system. So I'm not entirely sure what that question means.
That's okay. We'll move to the next question. The other one is, you can translate from a curl command to the HTTP format on IntelliJ, like it works on the Postman, I mean. So probably that's a statement, not a question. So is it possible to translate from a curl command to the HTTP format?
Actually, I think it was possible in the past. I had the impression it might have been removed, so it was possible at some point. I also have to actually follow up. Actually, let me just quickly see what happens. We can see what happens if I post in that curl command here. Look at that. I was just lying to you. So you just take the curl command, you paste it in here, it gets converted automatically to the HTTP client format, and you even have the curl here commented out. There was just an explicit also function somewhere where it said import. Look at that. I forgot what I was talking about. So here's a nice little icon up here where it says import from curl command, and also there was a slightly different format, legacy REST client files. You can forget about that for now, but you can actually, yes, you can import the curl commands here as well.
Great. So because we are running out of time, let me quickly show you some comments on the screen. So this is, thanks for making YouTube videos. So Margot, that's for you. And this is, oh my God, there's so many comments. So thank you, JetBrains. Great talk. Marco and Vitali, keep the super presentations coming. And oh my God, because as we're getting... I'm so sorry. That auto transformation is nice. I marked a couple of comments, but I'm just missing where do I have. So in short, thank you so much, Marco, and thank you so much, Vitali, for asking all those questions. It was amazing. I have a few thank yous as well. Of course, a big thank you to Yuri for answering the questions in YouTube chat, Sergey from the video team, Zlata from the marketing team, Daniel from the graphics team, and everyone else involved. And of course, everyone for attending and asking the questions. Before I forget, there are links to more information about what we do on your screen right now. You can visit the blog post. There are a couple of blog posts on the command HTTP Client CLI by Yuri. Those are super informative. And of course, you can follow Marco on his credentials. Socials are on the slide right now. And thanks everyone for joining in. We already have a couple of sessions planned for you. We would have Rudy talking about testing Jakarta EE applications. We would have Jose from Oracle talking about lightweight virtual threads in Java, which would be a production feature in Java 21. So do not miss our announcements. And thanks everyone for joining in. And thanks. And before we close, Marco, do you have any closing comments? Yeah.
No, it was a pleasure. I hope you all learned something, took away something from it. Give the HTTP client and the CLI a try. And also thank you, Vitali, for being here and asking questions. And thank you, Mala, obviously. So thanks everyone.
Thank you, Marco. I learned a lot. Thank you very much. So it was very useful for me personally.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. And do join us for our next session. So until then, bye-bye.
Bye.